So welcome all of you. We'll start today's session by paying our obeisances to His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So we are on our journey for chapter 4, which is titled as Transcendental Knowledge. So this was the verse we gave for recitation. I think all of you who are on the call have sent the recording, so we'll move further then. So we are, like I said, in the first 6 chapters, we categorize under Karma Yoga, the middle 6 into Bhakti Yoga, and the last 6 chapters of Gita, we categorize that under Jnana Yoga, right? So in the first part, we are now in our journey for the 4th chapter, which has 42 verses. And today we will be covering the last section of the 4th chapter. And this will be, so we'll wrap up 4th chapter today, which is the last section is method, results, and glories of attaining Jnana. So just today it is going to be a short session. And I just wanted to walk through, a kind of refresher for what we have covered so far in the 4th chapter, because like we know, the 3rd chapter concluded that how can we control, the greatest enemy? The answer was, which Krishna gave us, through the spiritual intelligence, which is through the spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And 4th chapter covers the transcendental knowledge, right? So what exactly is the flow? Right? So just to quickly recap. So we started the chapter with the first and second sloka, which talked about, how we receive this knowledge, right? It is received through disciplic succession only. That's what Krishna is highlighting, right? So when we talk about this disciplic succession, Krishna also gave an idea as what that disciplic section, from where who was the first Krishna gave that knowledge to. But prior to that, Krishna also gives the qualification of a recipient, right? And he highlights the qualification, right? Which is to be his devotee and friend, right? So these were the 2 qualifications which he did. So it was a devotee and a relationship with Krishna. And because he was telling this to Arjuna, the relationship of Arjuna with Krishna was as a friend, right? So the qualification for us, right, to receive this knowledge is to be a devotee and to have a relationship with Krishna. Then followed by that, we got the question, right, from Arjuna, because Krishna in the 1st and 2nd shloka, he mentioned how this transcendental knowledge was given by him to Vivaswan, the sun god, and then through him it went to Manu, and then it came in disciplic succession to Ikshvaku, right? Ikshvaku was one of the greatest king in Ram, Bhagwan's dynasty, right? So, so while this disciplic succession was given, Arjuna questioned that, for us, right? Of course, Arjuna knew Krishna's position, but for us, he asked the question that that sun god, Vivaswan, he is so senior, right? And Krishna is Arjuna's friend, so he's more or less that age, right? So how is it that Vivaswan is so senior to you, and how did you, how did Krishna instruct that science to him? Then Krishna, comes, the next few shlokas really gives that, Krishna gives his unique position, right? So how Krishna mentions that there have been, many births, thousands of births, both Krishna and Arjuna, all of us have passed, right? And the difference between Krishna and us is that Krishna remembers all of them, but we cannot, right? So that's his position, that's his unique position as a supreme, right? And then Krishna also mentioned about his appearance, right? So how he highlighted that he is, unborn, right? He is not born. He appears and he disappears, right? He's not having a birth and death like us, right? Why? Because his body is transcendental. It's fully, transcendental. And it is not like ours, which can deteriorate in due course. Right? So he also highlights that he appears in every millennium. So there are two words there as well. He's unborn, he doesn't have a birth and death like us, and he appears rather in every millennium. And then we came to the most, famous shloka, right? 4.7 and 4.8. 4.7 is Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya. So Krishna highlights that whenever and wherever there is decline in religious principles, and there is a rise in irreligion, right? He descends himself, he appears. Right? And what is the purpose of his appearance? We discussed this in pretty much detail as well, that his primary purpose is something else, whereas the secondary purpose is something else, right? His primary purpose is to deliver his pious devotees, right? To deliver his devotees, right? For his devotees, he comes. That's his primary purpose. And his secondary purpose is to kill the demons, to annihilate, yeah? And why to kill the demons? He can as well, he doesn't have to appear, right? He can kill the demons even where he is placed, right? In being in Golok, when he can create this whole cosmic manifestation through just a glance. For him, it is very easy to either send someone to kill these demons, or he himself doesn't have to. So the primary purpose for him is to to come for his devotees, to for their long lives. Right? So and then to establish the religion. That is the thing. So then we learned about the famous verse as well, which is 4.9, which you all recited, Janma Karma Chanedivya, right? It is very, the Tattvataha is in this, right? One who knows Krishna's appearance and activities, then they don't have to take birth. They don't have to undergo this birth and death cycle again. So that is, Krishna highlights that very clearly, right? And then we saw how, if we are fully absorbed in our devotional service to Krishna, then, we get freed from our attachment to this material world and fear of us, the most fearful thing, which we always think about is death, right? And to fall down again as well, right? So it is being freed from attachment, fear, and anger. Right? So being absorbed in this transcendental knowledge, we are freed from this, and eventually we attain that prema for Krishna. Right? So then, this last week you recited this verse 4.11, Ye yatha mam prapadyanti, right? So Krishna is reciprocal. This is a very nice verse, right? So he is reciprocal. As we surrender, he rewards us accordingly. He assures us that, right? It is very important. And then we saw a glimpse of demigod worship, where Krishna said that why do people still, even though they know that if they can surrender to Krishna, they can still get they get the rewards, but still some people go into demigod worship. Why? Krishna highlights that here briefly, that why? Because these people want quick results. They want short-term results rather than long-term. They don't want to look at the long term. So that's because they are so attached to this material. They want to gain, that fame, power, all of that quick. Whereas Krishna, we saw with the example of Dhruv Maharaj during our session, that how Krishna's approach is to first purify us so that we don't, spoil ourselves more with that material appearance, right? So he first purifies us, and then, he grants us, with what we need. And followed by this, we of course demigod worship, like we discussed, it will be extensively mentioned further in the chapters as well, various places. And then we learned the 4 varnas which Krishna has created, and we have to remember these varnas are created. Why? Because based on our psychophysical nature, each of us have our own psychophysical nature. And we are, we fall into one of these varnas. But the purpose of varnas, is what it has, it is as per the scriptures, right? It is as per our Vedas. And the main purpose of all the Varnas creation is for us to eventually dovetail our services based on our psychophysical nature, dovetail ourselves to Krishna, so that eventually we have to please Krishna. That's the objective, right? To please Krishna. So that's the purpose overall. Then we saw how Krishna, even though he has created these varnas, modes, he's not influenced by it. He's above and beyond. And how we should rather not explore things on our own and conclude or speculate things, right? We should follow the acharyas. Right? And then we learned about, the three kind of karmas, right? Karma, vikarma, and akarma. Right? And Krishna acknowledges in the 16th verse that the intricacies of these karmas are very difficult to understand. It is not easy. And he also highlights that we have to understand these three very properly. It is very important for us to understand what is action, inaction, and forbidden action, very clearly. And he terms this person who understands what are these three, he calls that such person as intelligent. So that's what Krishna is calling. So the person who sees inaction in action, action in inaction is intelligent. And we saw how when it comes to inaction in action, Arjuna following, the instructions of Krishna and fighting the war. That is inaction in action. Whereas action in inaction, we saw the example of Vishwamitra. And also it can be the example where if Arjuna would have, if Arjuna would have, he was inclined to renounce, right, initially. Renounce and go to the forest, and that would be, we saw, forbidden action, right? So and then after these three terminologies, clarifications, we saw how akarma is the one which we need to perform, because why? Because akarma, so karma has a reaction which is punya, good reaction. Vikarma has sinful reactions, and we have to take birth again and again to face those good or bad karma. But akarma is something which is reaction free, right? So it burns up all the reactions, so it is reaction free. So we should be inclined to perform akarma. Then we saw how the knowledge, this transcendental knowledge, how it burns the karma. That is that's what we discussed, right? Performing a karma. And a Krishna conscious person, he's free. We took the example of Prabhupada, right? He's free from any reactions of work. There is no fruit of reactions for expected. Then we saw the stage of perfections. Though someone whose mind and intelligence is perfectly controlled, and we are clear on the bare necessities of life, right? And also being satisfied in self and does not envy. So these were some of the characters we saw, which is stage of perfection. And eventually we saw if a person is unattached to to this material world, and he's fully situated in this transcendental knowledge, he can get into, he's qualified to get into Brahman. And further, yes, we learned last week about sacrifice, right? Why we need to perform sacrifice to purify ourselves, yeah? And we saw different kind of sacrifices. Krishna also highlights, right? Demigod, Brahman, Paramatma, right? Different kind of sacrifices. People also sacrifice material possessions, right? Which is charity or different kind of sacrifice. So, and eventually how Krishna says that the one who sacrifices in knowledge, performs the sacrifice in knowledge is the most dear to him, right? That is the top of it. That is the highest, right? And why we need to do this sacrifice? Because it yeah, it leads, like the third chapter also. We see it in fourth chapter and third chapter, where Krishna highlights, performing sacrifices gives you happiness in this life and liberation also, right? So, whereas if sacrifice is not performed, Krishna highlights in 4.31 that without sacrifice, one can never live happily, nor in this planet, nor in next, nor they can get liberation. So, and then we saw how these sacrifices, right, performed, which are performed in knowledge, yeah, that's what Krishna recognized, that is the highest. They eventually, turn into or culminate into this transcendental knowledge. The knowledge is awakened as you perform sacrifices. Your heart gets purified, right? The more your heart starts purifying, the knowledge, the rust which is set on our brain, it starts, coming down. So, the knowledge is awakened overall, right? Now, today, we will be covering the last section. Now that we know that how this transcendental knowledge, helps us, right? It helps us to go back to Krishna. It helps us to live happily in this life and get that liberation also. So now Krishna explains what is the method to get this transcendental knowledge, the results. Once you get this transcendental knowledge, what is the results, and glorifies, attaining this knowledge. So again, I think sacrifice. We have been talking about this, but this is really important for us to understand, right? Third chapter covered it, fourth chapter sessions covered it. Just a glimpse on, why we need to perform, right? So when we are saying that sacrifice, right, what is it? It demands for us to give up something. And, we eventually learn, I think, the art of giving, right? Because we love to have ownership of everything around us. But sacrifice, the word itself, it is like, it's an art of giving, the tendency to give, right? Which makes us, eventually, as we sacrifice more, we realize that how that leads to a kind of lack of an acceptance, right? A lack of ownership. And, we have the tendency then, if we are doing some sacrifice, we get the tendency to serve as well, right? Because we are learning to give, to serve, may it be anything. Even people who are sacrificing, we learned, last class, that there are people who do charity, right? Sacrificing their material possessions. Still, that is better than people who are not performing any kind of sacrifice itself, right? Because what happens is, it helps us to learn the art of giving back, right? And this will eventually help us to save us from that ultimate distress, right? It will cause distress to us, yeah. And we learned that there are, of course, it's like initially we might feel the pinch, but as we learn the art, we know it is good for us. It's like we have given the example here of a doctor. Initially when we are having some infection or something, the doctor tries to remove the pus, right? And this is, it is painful, but it eventually relieves the body from that pain, which can be extreme, right? So it's that process that initially it might, but we learn the art. It is for our ultimate good. And through sacrifices, we are meant to restrain our senses, purify our mind, and engage soul in service of Krishna, yeah, to go back to Godhead, right? So, yeah, so I think it's clear now that yajna or sacrifice, it is ultimately fruitful. Any yajna or sacrifice which we perform, we can get all of the fruit. It can be fruitful only when, we gain that transcendental knowledge. If we gain that, because only when we get that transcendental knowledge, we can perform activities which are akarma. Only when we are in knowledge will be able to perform our karma activities, right? Yeah. And only when we perform our karma activities will be eventually freed from this cycle of birth, and will be free from the reactions of birth, right? So any sacrifice done, if eventually it is not letting us to gain that transcendental knowledge, right? If we don't see that us gaining that, then it is not, the highest. That's what Krishna is also saying. So it will cause reactions, and we have to take this birth, that cycle. Okay. Now, right. So maybe Hari Krishna ji, will you be able to read this?
Yeah, yes, Mataji. The whole teaching of Gita is targeted toward the end that a living being as Krishna eternal. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is it audible, Mataji?
Yes.
The whole teaching of Gita is targeted toward the end that a living being as Krishna's eternal servitor cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being an identity apart from Krishna is called Maya.
Right. Thank you. So this point is very important. We need to clearly understand what is Maya, right? And that is nothing but what? The illusion of this material world, right? So, and further we have, yeah, if you could continue reading, Hari Krishna ji.
Yeah. When one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from his illusion.
Right. So, liberation from illusion. What does this mean? Illusion is what? Illusion is what we learned in the second chapter, the first lesson which Krishna taught us. Illusion that we are this body, not soul, right? That is the illusion. That is our major problem, right? We correlate everything with us as our body, right? So when we are engaged in the transcendental service, we get that liberation from this illusion. We come out of this Maya. Illusion is nothing but this Maya, illusion of this material world, right? Now, when we talk about liberation, our normal tendency of thought is that someone can get liberation once they leave this body, right? Yeah, so like the soul is liberated from that body, right? But Krishna highlights, we see here highlighted that if a person is in Krishna consciousness and his mind and intelligence both are situated in Krishna, then the soul can be liberated in the same body, even by living, they can be called as liberated persons, right? It's like anything, yeah, when we talk about this illusion again, anything which we see in this material world for which we think it is really valuable to us, right? We see that but it cannot be used in Krishna's service. So we need to understand that that is Maya. Anything which attracts us, which we feel very valuable, but we cannot use it in Krishna's service, that in itself is illusion, right? So liberation, the third point here, liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna. Yeah, this is mentioned in Bhagavatam. So liberation, a person being liberated, it cannot be just after he leaves this body, right? It has to be clear that if any person whose consciousness, whose mind intelligence is fully focused on Krishna conscious activities, yeah, he is liberated even in the same body, living in the same body. Yeah. So yeah, so yeah, so the last point here is ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. I hope this is clear, right? Ignorance is we being under illusion that, that we have the proprietorship, ownership, we are this body, I have control over everything, declining Krishna's, presence. That is ignorance, and that ignorance causes us to keep performing karma and vikarma, eventually being binded to this material world. Yeah. But once we are awakened, once that knowledge, transcendental knowledge is awakened within us, through performance of these sacrifices, our heart gets purified and this knowledge awakens, right? So through this, eventually we can get liberation. Yeah, because we will gradually, reach the path where our mind and intelligence will also completely be into Krishna conscious activities. Yeah, we learned that that piece before, right, where it was saying that both religion and philosophy, both is important, right? They go hand in hand. Yeah, if we have if someone follows religion without philosophy, that is sentimentalism, right? And sometimes it also leads to fanatism, that my way is the right way, right? But and the other side, philosophy without religion, you know the theory, but you are not following the rules, then it is mental speculation, right? So both go hand in hand, religion and philosophy. Okay. Yeah, so this knowledge, what is it? It is a mature fruit of devotional service. This is needed for us to perform. Yeah, that. Now, Jyotiji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, Mataji. Mental speculation, dry arguments, or independent study of books cannot help one to attain perfect knowledge. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master, Guru. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So we just going back because to the section, right? The section was method, results, and glories of attaining this jnana. Now this particular piece, what the next verse we are going to do, and this slide refers to the method, right? So we discussed right before also the examples like just by our own we cannot understand spirituality, right? It's similar to even in this material world, right? Our children or us as well, we studied our qualifications by going to schools or colleges, right? We did not explore it on our own, right? So because it is not possible, you're not in the right channel then, right? So if for material world, for material qualifications, we can make sure that we are in the right setup, right institution, right preaching, then we have by now, I think all of us understand that spiritual consciousness is much more higher, right? So how much we have to be sure that our spiritual knowledge, it's channelized the right way, right? It's very important, right? So spiritual, and that's what this whole statement says here, that just by mentally speculating, by arguments, by us independently studying the books, one cannot attain the knowledge. And we can only get that when we are, under the guidance of a spiritual master, which is a guru. Yeah. Now, this verse 4.34, this is the first verse for today. And this is particularly highlighting, the importance of guru, right? The method to attain that jnana, transcendental knowledge, is only through a guru, spiritual master. Okay. So, Kavyaji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, Mataji. Process of attaining Gyan from a Guru by surrender, inquiry, and service. Tadvidhi prani patena pariprasannena sevaye upadekshanti te jnanam Jnaninas Tattva-darshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So this will be the verse which will be given this week for recitation because it's really important. Yeah. So I think by now we are clear that we need a guru, right? We have spoken this many times. Now, Krishna is also highlighting. Well, yes, we need a guru, but how should the approach to the guru should be? What is the qualification of a student, right? Now, in this verse, tadvidhi pranipatena, right? Pranipatena means by taking shelter of a spiritual master. Okay. Then pariprashnena sevaya, pariprashnena, inquiring. Yeah. How? Just not by raising questions, abruptly. It's by sevaya, by rendering service. Right. Upadekshanti te jnanam. Yeah. Upadekshanti means they will initiate, they will progress you. Yeah. In that knowledge, te jnanam. In that knowledge, they will progress you in that knowledge. Jnaninas tattva-darshina. Why? Because these jnaninas, it's not referring here with the material qualification jnani, it doesn't refer to that, right? It is about a self-realized person. And we saw what are the characteristics of self-realized person in second chapter, sthita prajna, right? So here it is more, this person, jnaninas, it's a self-realized soul. Is God realized, right? Tattva darshana. He will show you the truth. Yeah. So there are 3 levels here, right? Level 1 is pranipatena, right? Pranipatena means it is by taking shelter. So that is like humility of us by our body, right? There are 3 levels of humility here for us to understand. So pranipatena is humility by our body, right? Pariprashnena, inquiring questions. That is humility of speech. Okay. Upadekshanti te jnanam. Upadekshanti, they will direct you, right? So that is our humility of our mind. No questioning and having faith in spiritual master and following their instructions. Okay. Upadekshanti. Right? So there are 3 levels here overall. Yeah. And like I said, jnani here does not refer to being highly qualified in academic knowledge, yeah, or being a scholar in that, but it's rather being scholar in transcendental knowledge, knowledge for Krishna, how to go back to Krishna, right? In this picture, can somebody say who are they?
I'm guessing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and one of the Goswami.
Yes. So it's, thank you. So it is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sanatan Goswami. So Sanatan Goswami, just so that, I think some of you, to be sure that everybody understands, Sanatan Goswami is, one of the 6 Goswamis. Yeah. And he was actually materially, he was in a very high position at that time when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. He was one of the most important officers at a prime minister position, more or less, during the Muslim ruler at that time, who was Nawab Hussain Shah. Yeah. Now, Sanatan Goswami himself was such a great scholar of that era, that Nawab Hussain Shah didn't want to let go Sanatan Goswami and his brother Rup Goswami. He had given them such high positions in a Muslim. So it's like, when Sanatan Goswami was so qualified, but still, we see him bowing down to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and what he bowed down to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saying that I am a fool, I'm fool number 1. Please, bestow me with this transcendental knowledge. Because he, even though academically or materially, he was so qualified and he had that position, but still he knew this is like zeros. If you remember, we had in the first 9 sessions, a slide where your power, fame, beauty, everything are, they account for zeros. And this will always be zero if you don't add a 1. There will be no value of these zeros if you don't add that 1 in front of the number of zeros, no matter what you add. And that 1 is spirituality, right? Unless you don't have spirituality, that knowledge, everything else is equal to 0, right? So here we learn that, inquiry by a student is just not, it should be submissive. It should be just not by asking questions, right? It should by rendering service to the guru. Only when you render service, your heart gets, it's like a lift system for getting purified. Awakening of knowledge along with service, that to submissive behavior, that eventually leads us, to have a quicker pace to Krishna. Yeah. So approaching a spiritual master basically here is like that it's like getting a guidance, that like a lift system, straight away it makes you all your doubts clarified, and your knowledge really awakens. So, and that's why bhakti yoga, like we learned before, out of all the ladders, bhakti yoga is a lift system, right? It directly takes you, you have one pointed thing, which is Krishna. Yeah. So overall here, the 3 main qualities of an ideal student, what do we learn? First is the eagerness to learn. It should not be learning from, spiritual master or learning about spirituality. You should have that eagerness, that enthusiasm. And that's what we all are here for, right? We are joining this class because we want to know more about Krishna. We want to explore Gita. We want to understand Gita. That eagerness is there, right? So that's exactly, eagerness to learn is the first. Second is obedience to the spiritual master or the teacher, right? So, and the third is being grateful to the teacher. These are the 3 main qualities of ideal student, right? Once you have that gratefulness, they say that grateful heart, it's the best place for reciting devotion. That's how it's said, so that's the key thing. And when we are talking about submissively inquiring, right? It might be that several times especially when we start our journey, we have so many questions in our mind, right? Something which are so applicable to our day-to-day life, and something which are applicable to something we have heard from others. So we have so many, it's like a khichdi, right? Who is right, who is wrong, we don't know. And when we try to start our journey, or we start our journey rather, we see that some of those questions when asked, maybe even this forum, when you ask a question, it might be resolved sometimes, but sometimes it's still a bit not really sure in your mind. You want to be, it's not really, you don't get your answers, right? Spiritual journey is like that. As we perform Krishna conscious activities, that why do we say purification of heart? The more the heart purifies, we say knowledge awakens. And that is it. Quite a lot of answers you will see that you are not even seeking for those answers at times, but those answers, you're from your inside within, you get those answers. Or suddenly you come across something which answers you, seeing someone serving somebody, or giving some lecture, or some preaching task, or some personal service to Krishna as well. So it's like not, that's why we say we need to have patience immensely to learn the subject matter, because it is the most confidential subject matter, right? So sometimes your questions may be answered, sometimes not, but eventually you will find that experience. And that's why we say spiritual journey is experiential. As you experience more, you will see automatically quite a lot of your doubts get resolved, so okay, so that was the one thing. And further, okay, with this picture also, does anybody know Who is this?
Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
Right, right. But Prabhupada, yeah, we can see Prabhupada here as well behind. So this is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And yeah, when I think we also discussed this before in the sessions, that when the first time he saw Prabhupada, you know, he said, you know, preach, you know, just preach, spread Krishna consciousness message. And then we also see how he also mentioned to Prabhupada that any moment of life, you know, when you have the capacity, you know, print books. That's what he said. That was the advice he gave, right? And Prabhupada really, you know, he followed every instruction of his spiritual master, yeah, to his best capacity. Right? Now, because Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's, you know, overall approach, like we can, you know, have the devotee association. Some people can have devotee association. Some people can, you know, hear, you know, content and learn, try to learn some. But he found books as to be a medium which is not restricted, you know, across the oceans. So these books will work so well that, and today we see that, you know, around more than 50-60 crores of, you know, books of Prabhupada are distributed, right? And this is causing the whole, this is impacting mass. And that was already foreseen by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that books are the medium through which, you know, you can impact huge masses, right? So, sorry, my screen is, yeah. Ramaprabha Mataji, will you be able to read it?
The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu Shakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path, nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect.
Right. Thank you. So I think we already covered these pieces, right? How important it is, you know, serving the spiritual master, right? It's like we gave this example before of this light in the, you know, in our house, the bulb. It will only work, right? It will only give you light if it is connected to the main supply, right? So it is, spiritual master is that medium, you know, which connects us, helps us connect. Yeah. Now, one of the important thing here to understand is we, you know, that kind of transformation within us can only happen when we follow these instructions, when we follow the instructions of our spiritual master. Yeah. Submissively and inquiring. Yeah, submissively. So it is nothing but just, yeah, without questioning, having the faith and following the instructions. Yeah. So, yeah, this guru doesn't come in between us and Krishna, but he removes what is between us and Krishna. Yeah, that is the wall of false ego. Yeah. None of us want to accept that we have a high ego, right? But that's the thickest layer, right? We learned our gross, you know, elements of our body and subtle. And we see how false ego is the most closest to the soul, that layer, right? So the gross elements were earth, water, fire, air, ether. And the subtle were mind, intelligence, and false ego. And false ego is the thickest one. and it's the closest. So this is the most difficult to overcome, right? And because it's the most difficult, we are given, by Krishna, the instruction to have, to have that off by a spiritual master. Yeah, it is the spiritual master who destroys all those doubts in our hearts and makes us realize our constitutional position, that we are the servants of Krishna. Yeah. Now we did the method. We are going to now do the remaining two aspects, which is results and glory of this transcendental knowledge, right? Now, would Reshma ji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, Mataji. Yet jnatva na punar moham ivam yasyasi pandava yena bhutani asheshani drakshasya atmani atho mai. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine.
Thank you.
Well,
So, yajnatva na punar moham. Moham is what? Illusion, right? Yajnatva, by knowing this, yeah, there will be na punar moham. We will not fall again into illusion. Yeah. Evam yashasi pandavaha. Yeah. That you have to understand, right? Yena bhutani asheshani. Right? Bhutani here refers to all the living entities. Yeah. By knowing this, all living entities, drakshasi atmani atomahi. Drakshasi means, they will see, what they will see? Atmani atomahi. That the supreme soul as super soul, which is Krishna, is within every living entity. Okay. So just by this knowledge, what happens? That it is for us, we will never fall into illusion, into Maya again. That is the, key thing. That's the best thing of getting this knowledge, right? Because why you will not fall again into Maya? Because you will start seeing that each and every living entity, are nothing but the part and parcel of Krishna. Yeah. Now, so overall, what does it mean? That by what are the results of this knowledge? That there will be no punar moham. That is, there will be no further bewilderment. Will not get into that illusion again. Yeah. And drakshasi atmani, atomai. So it bestows us the pure vision. Yeah. That pure vision, that we will start seeing that all living beings are nothing but the part and parcel of Supreme Krishna. Yeah. So will not be in illusion. That is, there will be no bewilderment once we are in this knowledge, and we will get that pure vision. So these are the things. Now we can correlate this into this. So what do we see here? Can somebody tell me?
Cat is looking at the mirror and thinking it is as a lion.
Right. So I see a smile in everybody's face whose cameras are on looking at this, right? So this is how we think about ourselves. That we want to be the, proprietor, right? We want to be at that position, right? We want to see ourselves in that position, right? And that's what is illusion. This material world puts us in that illusion. Somebody praises us to few things, we are on top. We are, yeah. And the same person might give us a feedback, constructive feedback, and we will not like it. So yeah, so that's us, right? So Yeah, so the results of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul or one who knows things as they are, yeah, is learning that all living beings are part and parcel of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Yeah, the sense of existence separate from Krishna is called as Maya. Yeah, so anything we see without Krishna, that's what I said. Anything we see in this world, which is very valuable to us, but it is not, utilized for Krishna, then that is nothing but Maya. Right? Now, the whole teaching of Gita is targeted towards this end, that a living being as Krishna's eternal servitor cannot be separated from Krishna. We are eternal servitor. Yeah. We are not the king, like we are seeing ourselves in the mirror, right? So we are not. Yeah. So we have to keep reminding ourselves that we are nothing but. I have also, seen quite few people don't like to be called as servants as well, because the mindset we have when it comes to that term is keeping, because we are in this material world, we correlate it with the material world. But it is much, much exalted position in the spiritual world, right? But we hear always the spiritual world, material world is opposite reflection of spiritual world, right? So in material world, we look down when it comes to something called as servants, right? Whereas it's the other way around, in the spiritual world. Yeah. So the next piece is the living entities are separate part and parcels of Krishna. Yeah. And we have a purpose to fulfill. Yeah. Krishna mentions, in Gita, that Mamaivansho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Yeah. So we are nothing but fragmental part and parcels, each one of us, of Krishna, and in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, we had gone through this in the 9th session, one of the slides, where when we are talking about purpose to fulfill, we also learned that how, if, if one is born in India, Bharat Bhumi, yeah, we have an extra responsibility of spreading Krishna consciousness. And it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita that one who has taken his birth as human being in the land of Bharatvarsh, India, should make his life successful and work for the benefit of all other people. Yeah. So it is our primary responsibility. Yeah. So we have to remember that is our purpose, to be birthed as a human being on this. Yeah. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna. So liberation is just not when we leave the body, but within this body itself, if we have that, right? If our mind and intelligence is situated, that in that constitutional position as servants of Krishna, yeah, someone is liberated in that body itself. Now, last two shlokas are, the seed giving verses for the 5th chapter to start with. These are the last 4 shlokas where, Krishna is, giving both the glories of jnana, so, and how it is so important for us to be in this transcendental knowledge to cross over this material world. Yeah. So 36th shloka, maybe, yeah, Hari Krishna ji, will you be able to read it?
Yes, Mataji. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. Destroys sin. The boat of knowledge makes even the most sinful among sinners cross over the ocean of sins and miseries.
Right. Thank you. So Krishna, will see in this verse and next 2 verse that he is comparing knowledge to a boat, and later we'll see he's also comparing knowledge to fire. So boat, how, we see here, right? It is like a heavy ocean. People are struggling, and there are devotees on top of the boat, right? Also, so there are people. So across. So if someone is sinful, This comes to our mind, right? When we see this, if someone is sinful, how can they, how can that person be in the boat of knowledge? He's sinful, right? But we have to understand that that's what is the message here, that if someone is sinful, he can still be in this boat of transcendental knowledge. How? With the help and mercy of and the blessings of a spiritual master. Yeah, with the guidance of the spiritual master, with the blessings, this sinful person can eventually be on this transcendental boat. Yeah, so even he can be elevated, but he has to choose the right path. Right now, we have these. It's our mindset, right? Because we have these three modes: mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And if we go from down, then the most bottom one is ignorance, passion, goodness. And above mode of goodness is the Shuddha Sattva, which is pure goodness. Right? We always see that Westerners, we see they are, all these four regulative principles, we see more or less there. Most of them, are in the mode of ignorance and passion. Right? But when we come to Indians, primarily we would see, of course, we have varied degrees, people, all modes, right? But we see primarily the mode of, it's a mixture of passion and goodness, right? But we as Indians, we see in today's world how much influence we are getting from by the Westerners. We want to copy them in everything, right? Right now, the way we have to think about it is important for us to think that where that person is, it's not important for us to think where that person is situated right now, whether India or Westerner. It is important for us to understand what that person is looking at or aiming at. Yeah. So these ignorant people in Westerners, they are aiming at, something like towards this transcendental knowledge, towards this transcendence. That aim is important, because with that help of a guide or spiritual master, they can get into that boat of transcendence. But on the other side, if you can be in the mode of passion or goodness now, but if you are attracted and looking towards imitating the Westerners, you'll be more prone to not follow the four regulative principles. And eventually you even though you have currently the chances of being that boat, but you will not be eventually. So it's very important to understand, it's not that where the person is right now determines everything. It's what the person's consciousness is. Where do they want to be? And that's why, this whole movement, we see again and again why Prabhupada has mentioned this as Krishna consciousness, right? Because consciousness plays the key role in everything. Yeah. Okay. Further, this is a shloka from Bhagavatam. Yeah. So here Krishna mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, he compared the knowledge to the boat. We will see here, and we also saw in prior slide how much vast ocean was it. It was deadly looking, right? But in Bhagavatam, we see that it's mentioned clearly in the 10th chapter, 10th canto, 14th chapter, 58th verse, how for devotees, such a vast material ocean turns into nothing but a size of hoof prints of a calf, not even hoof prints of a cow. It is, you can see here in the picture, this is nothing but hoof prints of a calf. Such a huge material ocean to cross, it becomes the size of this, for devotees. So, would someone like to, Jyotiji, will you try to read this shloka?
Yes. Samashrita ye pad pallava mahatva pada punya sho murare bhava mavu dhirva taspada para pada yada vipada na tesham. For those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Mura demon. The ocean of the material worlds is like the water contained in a calf's hoof print. Their goal is Parampadam, Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. Bhagavatam 10.14.58. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you. So what else we want? Krishna is giving us assurance so many places, right? So who has accepted this boat, right? What happens? Boat is the plav. So samashrita ye pada pallava plavam. Plavam is the boat. Mahat padam punya yasho murarehe. So this shelter of this material creation, yeah, punya is supremely pious. Yeah. So padam padam yad vipadam na tesham. And the third line says param padam. What is that param padam? Param padam is nothing but that supreme abode. Param is supreme. Yeah, supreme abode. Right? That is nothing but Vaikuntha. What is Vaikuntha? Kunta is miseries, full of miseries. Vaikuntha is a place where there is no miseries. Okay, that's why it's called as Vaikuntha. Padam padam, right? So at every step, those material miseries, na tesham, are none. So so for us in this Krishna consciousness, Krishna has assured that once we take the shelter, once we understand this transcendental knowledge, we are in this transcendental knowledge, it becomes, the whole material ocean becomes the size of a calf's hoof print, yeah, which is easy to cross, definitely, comparatively, right? Now, just moving further, now I mentioned that in that shloka, Krishna mentioned about comparing the knowledge to a boat which carries us over this ocean, right? Easily carries us. And now he's comparing knowledge with fire. Yeah. So Kavya ji, will you be able to read it?
Yes, Mata. Destroys all reactions. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities, both pious and impious.
Right.
Hare Krishna.
Right. So it is acting like a fire, right? Perfect knowledge. So previous verse, we were talking how knowledge helps us externally, right, to cross over the material ocean. Here, it talks more about internal purification. Internally, all our, pious or impious reactions are burnt like a fire. As we keep chanting, as we follow the regulative principles, we get all this, gets burnt up, which helps us to awaken that knowledge. Right? And what is that perfect knowledge? It is knowing our position and Krishna's position. Yeah. And here this fire is not only burning our impious, but also pious, helping in that akarma, right? So not even pious nor impious. It makes us reaction free. It turns them into ashes. Okay. Now, yeah, what do we see here? I'll just, yeah, I think we have 2 to 3 more slides to go. So we see here in the picture, that we can see through, right? The water is still. And the second thing is it's clear, right? We can easily see through what is in the bottom, right? Now, let's read this and then correlate this. So Rama Prabhaji, will you be?
4.38. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. And one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge uh, within himself in due course of time. When we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. Bhagavad Gita 4.38%.
Thank you. So in this world, there is nothing so sublime. Now, what is sublime? Very high quality, very, very high quality. Yeah, and pure. There's nothing, right? Now, one who has accomplished this practice of devotional service through this transcendental knowledge, this person enjoys this knowledge within himself. Yeah. How do we look within ourselves? We look, within ourselves through our mind, right? Now, if our mind is like this water, which is very clear and still, it's easy for us to look within. But if the mind is turbulent, which is most of the cases for us, right, then we cannot see through ourselves. Yeah, that awakening for us is not there. And how this mind can be controlled, we will learn this in 6th chapter. It says like abhyasena tu konteya vairagena cha griyate. So abhyasa, through abhyasa and vairaga. Abhyasa means practice. Yeah, practicing our spiritual activities, chanting, reading here. Yeah, and vairag with what? Detachment with what? The regulative, not to do those regulative things. Yeah, so in due course of time, we see that such a person whose mind is still as clear of this water, this knowledge, he can see him within himself. And when we start seeing within ourselves clearly, we understand our real position, right? So yeah, so that's the from the purport. Again, Prabhupada is highlighting again in this purport that what causes our bondage? Our ignorance. Yeah, and what causes liberation is this knowledge. Yeah, again. Yeah, so yeah, so again 4.37 and 38. So far 34th verse we spoke about guru, how they can, that is the method to attain the transcendental knowledge. Then we learned about 35th verse where we learned how this transcendental knowledge helps us to be free from illusion, bewilderment, and gets us the pure vision, right? These are talking about from 35 to 38, they are talking about the results of these jnana. And then we learned how it acts as a boat to us, how it acts like a fire, which destroys all the pious and impious. Yeah. Now, again, we are just continuing this. So it destroys all reactions, similar to what, the same of fire, blazing fire. Yeah. So it's the same verse here. Yeah. And 38th, it is the purest. Yeah. In due course of time, it is attained by itself from within. That's why it is important for us to look within. Yeah. Which we saw the example with the water. Yeah. And how can we obtain that? By mature practice of Nishkam Karma Yoga. Yeah. So by performing without expectation of fruitive actions. Now, this is, this shloka is like 39th verse, which is highlighting the faith factor here. Shraddhava labhate jnanam tatparha samyatendriyaha jnanam ladva param shantim achirenadhi gacchati. Yeah. So a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual bliss. Shraddhavan, what is it? Faith. Yeah, a faithful person. Yeah, labhate means he achieves, right? Jnanam. Which jnana is it? Transcendental knowledge. So someone who has a thorough faith, yeah, he can achieve this knowledge. Yeah. And the other one, yeah, Sayam Indriya, so he will be able to control the senses. Yeah, Indriya is senses. Yeah, so, and eventually what is achieved here? Shantim, right? This is what we are achieving or struggling for in our day-to-day life, peace, right? He, yeah, Shantim Nadi Gachati. So he attains. Adi Gachati means he attains that peace. Okay. So what are the things here? To be clear, qualifications to above this, to achieve this transcendental knowledge are these three. Yeah. So first is faith. Yeah. Faith in our scriptures, spiritual master and Krishna. Second is dedication to this process. Yeah. And third is sense control. Yeah. So these three, help us to attain that knowledge. And we learned, right, that 9 practices of devotional service, right? We started it with Shraddha. Shraddha was the first one. And then it was like sadhu sang, bhajan kriya, anartha nivritti. So there are several stages there. And Shraddha is the first stage, right? And it eventually helps us to reach the last stage, which is prema for Krishna, right? So one who has all the above qualifications achieve the result, which is peace, spiritual peace, or Krishna consciousness quickly. So I'm just gonna rush a bit. Now that is one who is in knowledge, right? Now one who, qualifications of someone who cannot attain this knowledge is ignorant, but ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting souls, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. So Krishna cannot be more clear in this, I think, right? So 3 important words here for a faithless person. One is Agnaha, that is, he's ignorant, right? He's foolish like animals. Yeah, he doesn't have any knowledge nor faith. Yeah, the second one is Ashraddhanaha, faithless. So this person category are like, we call it, right, confused.com. They're always confused. They have little knowledge, but they have little knowledge, but they lack faith, and that's why they are always in confusion. They hear something from somebody and they get confused, So, and the third is samshaya, the doubter, right? Things don't go down, right? So it's he has both knowledge and little bit of faith, but his doubtfulness is so high that the process, whether the process is effective or not. Yeah, and that's what I was saying. We all may have doubts, but it will get clarified in due course. We see it, right? With the level of intelligence, with level of purification we have, it isn't allowing us to even understand when we are taught something, right? We'll realize it in due course. And that's what I'm saying from my experience, right? So, so these are the last 2 verses of 4th chapter. And these are, like I said, the seed verses for the next chapter to start with, because the next chapter, 5th, starts with Arjuna's confusion again. Like the 3rd chapter started with Arjuna's confusion, 5th chapter will also start with his question, confusion. Confusion around what? Around these 2 verses, because Krishna concludes here, and these 2 verses, Arjuna finds it contradictory. Yeah. So 41st verse. So yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchina samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibhananti dhananjaya. And the 42nd verse is tasmad ajnana sambhutam vritstham jnanasinatmanah chitvainam samshayam rogam athishto bharata. So 41st verse, Krishna is saying, one who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruit of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work, O Dhananjaya, or conqueror of riches. Okay, so here he is saying, perform devotional service and renounce the fruit, Nishkam Karma Yoga, right? And through this transcendental knowledge, all the doubts are destroyed, right? And 42nd verse is, therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Yeah, armed with yoga. So, O Bharata, stand and fight. Now, what is confusing Arjuna here? That word in the first line of 41st verse, yoga sanyasta karmana. So Arjuna again takes this as, take, renounce work, sanyasta karmanam. So sanyasta means renounce. Renounce karmana means karma, action. Renounce action. Whereas Krishna is actually telling here, renounce the fruits of action. It is similar to the confusion Arjuna had in the beginning of 3rd chapter through that verse of Krishna, Durena hi avaram karma. Avaram karma, Arjuna thought fighting on the battlefield was avaram karma, bad karma. Whereas Krishna was trying to, then clarifies that if he renounces and runs away without fighting, that will be an avaram karma. Right? Krishna clarifies that later. Right? So here, same way, yoga sanyasta karmanam. Arjuna is taking is sanyasta karmanam is renounce work. But Krishna is actually, will clarify later in 5th chapter, that it is renouncing the fruits of your work, performing Nishkam Karma Yoga. Be situated, armed with yoga, right? So that's where we conclude today. And we will maybe